It's Sunday, December 3, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Joining us today is a former firearms industry executive who quit to write the best-selling book Gunfight, exposing gun-crazed extremism. He's now running for governor in Montana. Ryan Busse, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Hey, it's good to be back with you. Been a little while, but sure is good to hear your voice again. And we have a crazy week to talk about, so here we are.
We certainly do. Now, I find your career fascinating because, you know, you've been on quite a journey and you've gone in multiple directions. And your book was very successful, kind of lifting the lid on an industry that most people don't really know anything about. And you've certainly educated me on the firearms industry in the previous conversations that we've had. But now you've got to this point where, you know, politics is insane. The gun debate is just one issue amongst a plethora of divisive issues here in the US. So you live in Montana. Tell us why you wanted to become the governor.
Well, I wrote the book that I spent 25 years in the firearms industry, as you noted, and it felt to me as though I joined something that I appreciated and in many ways was a childhood dream, but it was overtaken by radicalism and really dangerous extremism. And in a lot of ways, well, I make the argument in my book that that's exactly what happened to our politics and that the politics of firearms and the firearms industry led that. Well, I live in a state where it's a dream for me to live there, Montana. We call it the last best place, and we call it that for a reason. We believe that. A lot of people visit, their TV shows about Montana. And it too is being taken over by the same sort of radicalized extremism that I saw overtake the firearms industry. And I'm very worried. I saw, in the gun business, people could have stood up, could have done something about it, could have shouted it down, could have stopped it. And frankly, I think it would have saved our country a lot of angst, and they didn't. I tried, but I became a lone voice. And I see the same thing happening in our state politics, and I'm not going to just let it happen. And so we're very worried about the changes that are being pushed on us and pushed on Montana. Montana's a long-held purple, even blue state. We had 16 years, except for the last two, where we have a very radicalized governor. But the previous 16, we had Democratic governors. We've long had two Democratic senators. We still have a Democratic senator in John Tester. So there's a long history of ticket splitting and Democratic support in the state. And I think it's important that we rescue that before this redness washes over the country.
What does radicalism mean to you in Montana? Because obviously we talk about it a lot on a national level and how the Republican Party has been taken over by extremists led by an authoritarian. But how does that filter down to Montana?
Well, interestingly enough, it's really quite similar. And I think Montana is at the forefront of this culture war across the country. The guy I'm running against, Greg Gianforte, many of your listeners will remember, he's the guy that body slammed the reporter when he was running for Congress. And so he doesn't take kindly to questions and press freedoms. And they talk about the First Amendment, but, when it's exercised against him, he body slams. He body slammed the guy, Ben Jacobs, writes for The Guardian. He body slammed him simply for asking him questions about healthcare. So you ask now how extremism manifests itself. And by the way, he's a self-funding candidate, spent $7.5 million of his own money to essentially buy the governor's seat. I have to operate under very strict, and I'm very proud of Montana's campaign finance laws. The one hole in it, self-funders. So he can fund himself to whatever level he wants. I have to do this at a maximum of $1,000. That's my max contribution. And we are rocking and rolling. But to your question about radicalism. So every little hot button social war thing, for instance, choice, they have made it known that they're going to do everything they can to remove a woman's right to choose. They passed and signed, he has a Republican supermajority. They passed and signed 6 bills in the last legislature to greatly restrict abortion. Thankfully, in our Constitution, we have a constitutional right to privacy, but they are already calling for a constitutional convention to remove the right to privacy because it extends to women's healthcare freedoms. He has a gay son. He funds gay conversion therapy. He flies around in his own private jet. He kicked 105,000 now Montanans off of Medicaid. 30,000 of those are kids. He refused a $10 million federal grant to feed hungry kids over the summer. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but this is, suffice it to say, this isn't your grandfather's or your father's Republican Party. This is a whole new level of vitriol and hate.
And it's that vitriol and hate that I find so interesting, that people can be so openly hateful and so openly evil almost, and yet there are still Americans that are prepared to vote for these people. So where does that come from? I mean, is it that, I was thinking the other day about how, right-wing radio over 30 years has brainwashed whole swathes of people, especially in middle America, where they've been told that Democrats are evil. And so they really have lost sight of the fact that they're voting for evil directly in the Republican Party.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're exactly right. It hinges, that sort of hatred and vitriol hinges obviously on the way that the other side can be demonized, castigated, and the way pejorative sort of pictures can be drawn. And so that's why I think it's important for somebody like me to run. I grew up on a rural farm and ranch. I had a horse 10 years before I ever thought about having a car or a truck. I drove John Deere tractors around in circles and squares. I graduated with 16 kids. The nearest pavement was 10 miles. The little town I grew up outside of was 641 people. I love to hunt and shoot. I worked in the firearms industry, and yet I'm a proud Democrat. I'm very worried about our democracy. I think the Republicans represent the radicalized part of the Republicans. And I don't think it's all Republicans, but I do think there is an overall lack of courage in the entire party. And there's just enough loud radicals to control it. We don't know how large that number is, but it's up to somebody to get into the fight, care enough about winning, which I do. Frankly, I think Democrats oftentimes care more about being right than they care about winning. And political parties are for one thing: they're for winning elections, and I plan to do that. And so I think it's incumbent on somebody like me to get in and say, look, Democrats aren't these boogeymen. They're not these evil creatures from outer space. They're not trying to steal and eat your babies. All these crazy conspiracy theories that have been, dreamed up to make everybody, or at least 50 plus 1%, hate Democrats. It's just foolhardy. So, you look at me, you look at my social media, you look at what I do, you look at the way I talk, and I'm pretty plain spoken. I don't fit the pejorative model that they've cast, and I think that worries them.
We had Rebecca Cook on the show a few weeks ago. She's running for Congress in Wisconsin. And she was telling me that when she meets people at state fairs and things, she doesn't tell them that she's running as a Democrat. She just introduces herself. She purposely leaves out the kind of the political persuasion just to get people to engage with her, because she finds that if they know she's a Democrat, they don't want to talk. How are you kind of overcoming this polarization? And what kind of tactics do you have for actually getting this message across to Republicans who ultimately have very much got a wall up about any kind of communication?
Well, I think two things are important. And I've thought about this a lot. I've studied it, and I have awesome advisors who are with me on this. I don't think Democrats like me, or most Democrats across the country, can run and win as apologetic Democrats. I just don't believe that. I think that, the reason I believe that is because I think that the values that we espouse, the values of the Democratic Party, are the values of working people, of the majority of people in the country. If we run as apologetic Democrats, we fall into the pejorative labels that are laid on us. Oh, yes, gosh, we might be kind of communist, right? I mean, how are you going to win doing that? You're not going to win. So I lead with values. I don't shy away from the fact I'm running as a Democrat. And importantly, I do not shy away from negative partisanship on the radicalized part of the Republican Party. I think Democrats oftentimes think, oh, gosh, we have to get all those votes. No, we don't. We have to lay out what is at stake. And if those people are trying to remove health care rights from women, which they are in Montana and across a lot of the rest of the country, then by damn, we better say it. And I think the reason I think that's important, Anthony, because a lot of people have scratched their heads about how is it that Donald Trump swooped in here, and how is it that so many Democrats can't seem to find their feet, and voters don't seem to trust them. And I think it boils down to a real simple thing. Oftentimes, Democrats' rhetoric does not match their actions, and voters see that subconsciously as sort of a fake put on, right? You can say a lot of stuff about Donald Trump, but generally speaking, his rhetoric matches his action. I mean, it's horrible, it's dishonest, it's all the sorts of things, but this is why voters say, well, he does what he says he's gonna do. Well, I mean, he says he's gonna light the thing on fire, and he does light the thing on fire. Democrats like, well, gosh, they might take women's right to choose, and then they don't campaign on it. That we don't fight like it. We don't govern like that. Oh, geez, democracy is at risk. And we're just now figuring out we have to campaign like democracy is at risk. If our rhetoric does not match our actions, then how can we expect voters to believe us? So I'm here to say my actions are going to match my rhetoric.
The Donald Trump brand is a big part of this. And, an appeals court on Thursday reinstated this narrow gag order that bars him from attacking court staff. He's spending as much time at rallies as he is in the courtroom at the moment, and that's only going to increase. Yeah. But we've also seen on Friday that the U.S. Appeals Court ruled that Trump must face civil lawsuits over his role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol by his supporters, rejecting his claim that he is immune. This is now going to become, we've talked before about, a lot of Republicans who are who are almost hoping and praying for a civil war, like they really want to kind of get at Democrats. And my concern is that, when Donald Trump starts to really face these charges and there is the threat of incarceration, that will ignite a kind of national movement of people to kind of, it'll make January 6th look like a kind of isolated local event because it'll be on a much greater scale. Do you think that there is a chance of that happening? Is that something that you recognize when you're talking to people, that they're so behind the cult leader that anything that happens to him, they just cannot remove their allegiance?
Yeah. So both, like my next door neighbor has the world record for Trump flags. He's had one up every single day since June of 2015. Yeah. All he does is change the year, 16, 20, 24. Right. And worse, he's got a big ass spotlight on it. So every time we drive into our yard with my kids, I see this, right? I talk to Trump voters all the time, and I tell stories on the campaign trail about it. And to your question about, do I think they believe it? I don't think the people that I talk to believe it. I think there is a loud slice. I don't know how big it is. 5, 10, if it's more than 1 or 2%, it's plenty frightening. I mean, that's tens or hundreds of thousands of people. But the Trump voters that I meet, and they can seem pretty vehement, right? I mean, I've got my next door neighbor, Norm, who's, besides our political disagreement over Trump, he's a wonderful neighbor. I think they're looking for off-ramps. I do. I think they're looking for off-ramps.
Yeah.
I think, in fact, a lot of them that I meet, I did this swing through eastern Montana, which is a very rural part of Montana. I did it just about a week ago. And these people are almost now worried that Trump is going to do the things he says he's going to do, and they don't want it on their conscience. Now, are there some whack jobs that are cheering that and like, oh, hell yeah, I want a civil war? Yeah, but I think it's a lot lower. It's enough to be deadly frightening, but it's not nearly as pervasive as we think it is. And I think people like me, we have to reach out to these people and identify on the 60 or 70% of values that we share. And I got to look away from that Trump flag. I tell a story on the trail about this guy I met. He came out to meet me with his Trump hat on. We ended up laughing and taking a picture. He said, "Can I leave my Trump hat on?" I said, "Bob, that's the best part. Leave it on." But we agreed on lots of other stuff. And he's not going to vote. He's not going to vote for this Greg Gianforte that I'm running against. And we have to give these people off ramps like this. Because this idea that people had that Trump voters are going to take down a flag that they've had up for 8 years, or they're going to take their hat off and they're going to run down to the middle of town, they're going to throw it in a big pile and light it on fire and then come back and hug us and tell us we were right. Dude, that ain't happening. It's not happening. We have to give them off ramps other places. And I'm doing that across the campaign trail.
It is interesting that with all the technology we have, nobody can really tell us how many of these real hardcore Trump supporters there are. It's like we recognize there are people that go to the rallies and there are people that wear the merchandise. That's fine. But you can't really assess people like your neighbor who recognize that Trump is an imperfect candidate And whilst it might be fun to play along with the kind of owning the libs and that kind of hateful movement, that at the end of the day, they are going to need to access some services themselves at some point in their lives, whether it be Medicare, Medicaid, or, as you say, abortion.
Yep.
Republicans need abortions as well, right?
Yeah.
So this
crazy.
is really the issue, isn't it?
Yeah. So, here's what's going on in Montana. This doesn't happen very often, but the Republicans here and our governor screwed up big time. They did what Republicans always do, which they start with a surplus last session and they give all of it away in big tax breaks to rich people and to big corporations. But to make up for that, they crank up property taxes on everybody in the state. So you heard this right. Republicans cranked up property taxes. So my next door neighbor, Norm, again, who's a prince of a dude, you just couldn't hardly ask for a better neighbor than him. The day after I announced, there's a big story in the newspaper, in the local paper, and I see Norm marching across the yard, and he comes over. I'm mowing the yard, and I turn the mower off. He says, young man, I just want to tell you how proud I am to be your neighbor, how proud I am that you're running for governor, and my property taxes are way up, and I'm mad, and I think I'm even going to vote for you. You see, like, when it comes, that was inside of that flag I was telling you about.
Yeah.
Like, it's still up there. Yeah. But he and I have met on something else, and he doesn't like those property taxes going up either. And Democrats we're going to have to look away from the flags. I know it's hard, but we're going to have to do that, and we're going to have to meet them on taxes or abortion. And we're winning on abortion. Ohio, Kansas.
Well, I was going to say Ohio is a very good example, isn't it, of how that this one issue might be something that men don't think about very much, but women think about it every month. Yeah. If not every day. And so, I really feel, because there were people, when Roe was overturned, there were Republicans thinking, people won't talk about it anymore. And it is such a thoughtless position to take, considering that this is very much a part of, of daily life and humanity. And maybe humanity is the word that's often missing from Republican thinking.
Well, and I think and here's the thing. This probably was an issue long before. Roe being overturned lit it on fire.
Yeah.
But even for a little while, you probably remember, like, Democrats are kind of like, well, do we really want to talk about it? Do we really want to say the word abortion? Do we really want to lean into this? Are you crazy? And that's Democrats can be so bad at forcing the choice. Republicans are pretty good at forcing choices. They can be ugly, but they're pretty good at it. And so I start every single stump speech with telling every single woman in our crowds, and we have big crowds, and every single person who has a mom or an aunt or a daughter or a friend, like, these people want to be in your doctor's office, and they want to tell you what you're going to do with your body. And if that doesn't creep you out, then you need to think about it a little harder. It should creep you out, right? I'm forcing the choice. And I think Democrats, if we're going to run and win on abortion and healthcare, then we have to force the choice, and we got to say it. We got to lay the stakes out. Again, that's something I'm doing, and people are responding. And I believe even conservative Republican women, maybe not around the dinner table, but in the privacy of the voting booth, they're going to vote for their own rights.
Because the oxymoron of promoting freedom and yet there not being any is actually starting to hit home, isn't it? The fact
I'm telling you, The Handmaid's Tale is not a made up thing, right? That's what these people want. Texas and Idaho are prosecuting women for driving across state lines.
Yeah.
Come on. Margaret Atwood could not have dreamed anything like that up. And as you probably know, she said after she wrote her book, she didn't make any of that up. She only used components of everything that's been tried or proposed on the globe already. So, these things are draconian. They're anti-freedom, they're authoritarian, you name it. Like, there's a lot of bad words to describe them.
And because America is, and Americans are by nature quite isolationist, because it's such a huge country and you got to fly a long way to, go elsewhere, and it's expensive. I, as a European, I keep coming back to the fact that the rest of the world has moved on, and that abortion being even a consideration for making illegal elsewhere in Western civilized nations, it's not even on the ticket. And yet
Mexico.
Right. This is where people are traveling to.
Yeah.
To access care.
The Mexican people, it's now legal and protected in the entire country of Mexico, a very Catholic country, by the way.
Yeah.
So we are, this is another thing. I just don't think our country is where this loud sliver of radicals is telling us it is.
Yeah.
Same on guns, same on abortion. Like somehow we let these people, led by Trump, we let them have the mic and we got the volume cranked up to 10. But they succeed by making us think there's more of them and they're more powerful than they are. In my experience, same deal happened when I wrote my book. You know, you and I talked. I thought I would get persecuted because I'm a gun owner who dared to criticize the firearms industry and irresponsibility. And the opposite happened. Yeah, I get some ugliness, sure. But the support I get is 95-5. Like people from West Texas and West Virginia and ranchers and farmers and people who say, I can't take it anymore. We can't keep just, turning our back on this stuff. And so, and it's still that way. And so I believe that the country's politics are that way, but it's going to take some democratic leadership to be loud and stand up for the values that we care about and not be afraid to push back on these bullies, because they are bullies.
I keep saying that I trust that Americans know better than to allow these kind of extremist views, which invariably are only present in their representation. The extremist views are not really seen, on the ground as much as they are in Congress or in governors' offices.
Exactly.
And this is a big differential, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, abortion is a great, you go ask, Republican, especially Freedom Caucus type radical Republicans, they still think every single person in the country will vote to ban abortion. They still believe it. Yet right. Every single time it's tried, the electorate shouts them down. Yeah. So that tells you what the radicalized part of the GOP is telling you is reality versus what is really reality. They're two different things. But again, unless we stand up and force the choice, one of that small slice can become reality.
We need to take a quick pause for our sponsor, but we'll come back and talk more on this with Ryan Busse next. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your wacky neighbour or some sketchy message board. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial that is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. I gave a Fume to my sister, and she was shocked at how flavorful and fresh it tasted. It's easy to hold and perfectly balanced and, quite honestly, extremely fun to fidget with. The real wood material and sleek design definitely classes it up, and she feels pretty cool holding it. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use code WEEKEND to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code WEEKEND to save an additional 10% off your order today. I've always found it difficult to find clothes that I like to wear, and when I find one thing that works, I just buy loads of them and just wear the same thing all the time. Well, men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. And here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion. The commuter collection offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, zips, and polos. You'll never have to worry about what to wear when you've got the Rhone commuter collection. The comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work or your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Roan's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. And with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Roan is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I personally love a technical fabric, something that is advanced and uses technology to make a more comfortable and more modern outfit. Now, the commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. So head to roan.com/Anthony and use promo code Anthony to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/Anthony and use code Anthony, ANTHONY. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Heart health and staying healthy, especially when you have a family that you want to be able to spend as much time with as possible, is so important. We could all benefit from heart-healthy energy, and one of the best ways to get some is by supporting your blood pressure and circulation. Superbeats Heart Chews are an easy and convenient way to support healthy blood pressure. They're plant-based and stimulant-free, so you get a green boost without the jitters. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Superbeats are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. Superbeats Heart Chews are incredibly delicious and so much better than any alternative supplements out there. I take my Superbeats Heart Chews each morning. It's really kick-started my morning routine. After taking my Superbeats Heart Chews, I feel like I have more energy and I'm ready to take on the day. Superbeats is the #1 doctor, pharmacist and cardiologist recommended beet brand for cardiovascular health support. It's blood pressure support that you can trust. Superbeats Heart Chews support healthy circulation, so you not only get blood pressure support, you also get productive, heart-healthy energy without the crash. Double your potential with Superbeats Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Superbeats Heart Chews and a free full-size bag of turmeric chews valued at $25 by going to weekendbeats.com. Get this exclusive offer only at weekendbeats.com. It's the Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. We're back with Ryan Busse, who is running for governor in Montana. We talk about extremism, and it's something that, unfortunately has infiltrated the Republican Party, not just at the fringes, as it always has, but now very much in the center of government with the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson, who is a far-right kind of evangelical Christian who has these extremist views. I'm not being critical of Christianity in any way, but I recognize that, from what has been reported, video and audio of him giving speeches previously, that he has pretty extreme views, including the praying away the gay, very much anti-abortion and everything else.
Yeah, he's the same exact as our Montana governor, same exact thing.
Okay, so how did you feel when you saw that Mike Johnson now has, he's second in line to the presidency, Ryan? This is serious business now.
It's really serious. It's serious for that reason because he's an architect of January 6th, right? In fact, I think that, he believes he was chosen to institute the next January 6th, or whatever date it's going to be. I haven't looked at the calendar. And I think the Republicans don't know how to let loose of this extremism. It's got control of them. There's lots of people in that party, lots of them, I know it, that they know this is the wrong path. They're not comfortable with it. But Trump has taught them these lessons that as long as you yell ever louder, become ever more extreme, keep moving the goalpost to the right, to the right, to the right before people can even catch up, like you can kind of hoodwink your electorate and maybe win one more election or just ink out one more election, right? And then this is where the authoritarian stuff comes in, because they're not doing it because they're secure in their majority. They're doing this because they're insecure in their minority. That's why they're acting like this. So I think it's very dangerous. Look, I don't share many politics with Liz Cheney, virtually none probably, but I share the part of politics where she recognizes that this is dangerous and indecent and threatens our democracy. I share that with her. And it's going to take a few more Republicans like that to stand up, or it's going to take leaders who run and win, probably from the Democratic side, who stand up and push back and give these people a safe space and prove that it's not a winning electoral strategy.
It is tragic, isn't it, that we can only really count two Republicans, Cheney, as you describe, and Adam Kinzinger, who isn't running again, as far as I know, as people that are standing up to Donald Trump and saying it clearly. And of course, they both took seats on the January 6th committee.
Yeah, there's a few, but they don't stay and fight, right?
Yeah.
Romney speaks up.
Yeah, well,
leaves.
he's gone.
Jeff Flake speaks up. He leaves. A few decent ones that they just quietly announce, "Oh gosh, I'm not going to run for the next term or the next election." Why? Because they can't take it anymore. But if people really care about the democracy, this is where I keep coming back to the people who say they care. I care. Then by damn, our actions better start matching our rhetoric, because the people who say they care on the far right, their actions, they're matching their rhetoric.
Yeah.
They say they're going to undo democracy. They're doing it.
Yeah.
They say they're going to strip women's healthcare rights. They're doing it. It's about time for somebody on our side, in the middle, reasonable, decent people, for our action to match our rhetoric. And that's really resonating in our campaign.
Is part of the problem, Ryan, that people don't really know what democracy is, and that, you know, because we've never lost it before, there is a sense that unless you're a news junkie or somebody, which most people are not, that actually the kind of fundamentals of democracy are not something that you need to ever worry about, because, as we know, America is the greatest country in the world, and, you know, it is what it is, and it will forever stay that way. And yet those of us who write about it and talk about it recognize that it is hanging by a thread. And is that a problem on the ground?
There's no doubt about the fact that I think, look, the kind of chattering class of political prognosticators for 15 or 20 years on the both right and the left, and I'm not a both sides person. I firmly place most of the blame on the right. But the truth is that there are on the chattering, on kind of the political prognosticators, we told everybody, a whole generation, that politics was a game, that it was a battle, that we reported on the polls, we reported on the way the elections went. We didn't report so much on the everyday hard work of maintaining democracy. And so I'm not really shocked now that Donald Trump, a reality show star, jumps in and capitalizes on the fact that we've told a whole generation of people that politics is a game.
Yeah,
because he's treating it like a game. And I think where this fits into your question is, like, this is deadly serious stuff. The way that our democracy works or doesn't, the way that rights are protected or they're not, it's a hell of a lot easier to tear something down than it is to build it up. And it took a long time to build this up, and it's not perfect, but it's the best the world's ever seen. And we can tear it down in, I'm telling you, if we have 4 years of Trump, you can, man, I don't even know what the country's going to look like. And I feel the same way about Montana. These people, and Greg Gianforte, the governor that I'm running against, we give him another 4 years, it's not going to be a pretty sight.
They're not even being shy about their plans. You know, I've often referenced Project 2025, which is this 1,000-page document that has been written by the Heritage Foundation and contributed to by dozens and dozens of far-right and extremist groups who give the impression that they're, serious, as Mike Johnson does, presents very well. But behind the sheen is a very destructive individual. And it's the same with this plan to basically abolish these pillars of American culture and society, get rid of the FBI, get rid of the judiciary, and rebuild the country in Donald Trump's image.
Yeah. I think that voters, to go back to what you asked, it's almost as if Americans perceive as American democracy as this sort of law of physics. Oh, don't worry. Gravity's always going to be here. It's always going to pull down. I mean, we can joke about gravity. We can talk about Newton and apples, but don't worry, it's always going to pull down. So they think of the FBI and of law enforcement and of our courts and of the rule of law and of rights and of reproductive rights and of healthcare coverage. They think of that kind of like gravity. It ain't gravity. Like there's no physical law that mandates any of that. We can choose or people who are louder and present themselves as more powerful than us, they can choose, or we can choose and fight back. Like I keep coming back to the rhetoric and action thing, but it's time for people who really care about it to start standing up and caring about it like the other side does.
And voting rights, of course, is under threat.
Yes.
I mean, there was a ruling only a week or so ago that you can't now kind of sue for your rights. I mean, this is very, very serious, and yet it is often lost in translation by nature of the complexities of the cases, or the fact that people are just simply too busy trying to earn a living to be able to keep tabs on these things.
Well, and again, this, I hate the both sidesism, but well, gosh, on the Voting Rights Act that you just noted. Well, today, these people lost on the voting rights thing and these people won. Like we report it like it's a football game.
Yeah.
It's not a football game. These are the rights of Americans to vote when they can register. If they have our rights are at risk, and we need to report it and treat it like that. It's not a game.
And in some states, and I don't know if you witnessed the car crash that was the debate on Fox that Sean Hannity moderated, where DeSantis and Gavin Newsom, who's not even running, obviously he's the governor of California, but he's not running for president, faced off with Ron DeSantis. And this was an example of how, Ron DeSantis was surprisingly well prepared, although they're now saying that he was taking frequent bathroom breaks during the ad breaks and getting help from his wife, who was hiding in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I actually think she should be running if they want to have any chance of winning. But
well, she's obviously the driving force behind
she's the driving force, right? But a lot of the rhetoric was, people are leaving California and they're moving to Florida because we have no tax here. And the reality is, if you dig a little deeper, that the cost of living in Florida is so much higher. You can't get insurance for your home, or if you can, the cost is astronomical, not to mention even insuring your car. And yet those things people are having to kind of dig around for, or they don't discover until it's too late and they've relocated. And DeSantis was pretty good at presenting that argument. And unfortunately, Newsom, it was a 2 against 1 because Hannity was also debating Gavin Newsom at the time. So, I mean, how do you feel about this kind of state warfare?
Well, it's kind of a joke, and it does kind of go to further Americans' belief that some of this is a game. But I will say this, and I'm not cheering Gavin Newsom. I haven't picked him as any kind of candidate or hero, but I will give him street cred. I will give him some credit for one thing. He's not afraid to go on Fox News, stand up for what he thinks, argue against DeSantis and the entire network and whatever chicanery they were pulling behind the scenes to give DeSantis advantages, including apparently letting his wife be in the bathroom and feed him answers, whatever. At least Newsom will go into the other side, have a conversation with the other side, defend his beliefs. And Democrats kind of, let's face it, they kind of lost the willingness and ability to do that, seems to me. So even if I don't agree 100%, or even if I think this is a little bit of a show, I give it to Newsom to at least have the gall and the fortitude to go make your case.
And so you're saying that part of the problem is that Democrats traditionally have gone to a knife fight wielding spoons.
If a spoon, yeah.
Right.
Like Democrats, they go to a knife fight and they unroll their 14-point policy plan. Look at this. Look how smart I am.
Yeah.
That's not how voters make their decisions. As I think we can see that, right? I mean, literally the Republican platform is literally whatever Donald Trump wants. That's the platform. So don't tell me that 14-point policy plans are the important thing for voters. They're voting on emotion, on narratives, on big picture. Yes, policies have to make sense under that. But I think, to your point, I think we've been going to knife fights or gun fights and rolling out the policy plan, and that ain't cutting it.
And part of the problem also is the candidate in Joe Biden is facing a lot of criticism for his age and his cognitive abilities, which are not being questioned by anybody on the Democrat side, but maybe they're not saying that loud enough either, because it's not, even though Trump is also old, comparatively, he brands himself as being 20 years younger.
Well, he appears to me that he's. I mean, he does seem to have a certain vibrancy about him. It's not anything that I particularly like, and I will fault the Democrats a little bit. I think this age thing was coming on Biden. Like anybody could see it. In fact,
Yeah.
remember we all talked about it when Biden was elected. We said, "Gosh, he's a transformational president, or he's going to perhaps he'll be one term." And like I remember talking about this.
Yeah, the one term thing was to get the job done in the moment.
Yep.
But the Democrats didn't prepare for term number 2.
And so we didn't prepare for term 2, and we knew the age thing was coming. And here we are again, walking into a knife or a gunfight with ill prepared.
Yeah.
So I personally, I would love to see somebody like Gretchen Whitmer run. I mean, I think she would be fantastic. I've been a big fan of hers. Believe me, if it's Biden or Trump, I will be fighting tooth and nail. And I think Joe Biden, he was handed a pretty tough mess. And to pick on him because he stumbles and bumbles, he's always stumbled and bumbled.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just part of the way he communicates, or sometimes doesn't communicate as effectively. I don't think much of that's changed, but I do think the Democrats have not done a great job of anticipating this age issue, and they've kind of walked into the trap and they're standing in it.
And the fact that he also has a very young, vibrant, and diverse cabinet, not to mention his VP. I mean, there is a really strong group there that he could be doing more with.
Yeah, I don't like the optics of, well, everybody in DC seems to be too old. I mean, not literally everybody, but the sort of leadership class of folks. I mean, McConnell freezes up every fourth press conference. Trump is old. Biden is old. Most of the senators are old. I think the country is kind of, both Republicans and Democrats are kind of, scratching and fighting and yearning for something a little fresher than what the political leadership is providing them. I think it would be a breath of fresh air if that were to happen. Obviously, I mean, I think the Republicans Trump's going to be the nominee. I just don't see any way that's not going to happen. So you're going to have a couple of old guys fighting each other again.
And sadly, when younger, diverse candidates do show up, and I'm referring to the squad, I mean, look at these 3 or 4 women who really have very positive intentions, have been criticized. They've been painted as some kind of far left extremist themselves, when actually they're not saying anything that anybody else isn't already saying. It's very frustrating, isn't it, that when you get close to some kind of evolution, it's not quite a revolution, but an evolution in candidacy, that they just get shouted down.
Well, let's just look at our presidential situation. If there was ever a time to be artful about bringing in a new class/age of leader, it was the Biden presidency, because the table had already been set for it. I don't know what we do now. It seems like kind of the time's upon us here. We're clicking inside of a year, but we could have been thinking about this 3 or 4 years ago. People were thinking about it, and then we just sort of pushed it off the table. So it's like we have these opportunities, we just haven't seized them. And I'm not here to bash Joe Biden. I think he's a decent, empathetic. He's done. Again, he was just handed, for lack of a better term, he was handed a shit sandwich.
But he's turned it around, though, hasn't he? Because inflation is down. The CHIPS Act was incredible. The infrastructure bill was incredible. He's now forgiven all of these student loans. Insulin capped at $35. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has happened that would have been impossible if it wasn't Joe Biden.
I think there is some great stuff that's happened, and I still worry a little bit that the White House is trying to tell voters in places like I live that what they're feeling isn't what they're feeling. Right. They like to say, well, the economy is really a lot better than you think it is. Well, when people are struggling, in Montana, things are expensive. Yeah. Wages have not kept pace with inflation. I get that the inflation is a complex thing, but wages have not kept pace. People cannot afford to live there. The average home sale in and around Bozeman, which is one of our big cities, such that we have cities, has been $800,000 in the last 6 months, and the median income in Montana is $62,000. The starting salary for a teacher is $34,000. So that just doesn't jive with the average home price of $800,000. People feel that angst. And so for the White House or national Democrats to say, hey, look, it's really a lot better than what you're feeling, that ain't selling.
But he is making the point that a lot of companies continue to price gouge, especially when it comes to gas and stuff like that, and energy pricing, that, whilst wages have not kept up with inflation, the salaries for the people who own these companies and these companies' profits that's where all the money is going. And
no doubt about it. And this is where the National Democratic Party becoming too linked with big corporations is not doing them any favors here, right? Because a lot of big corporations are gouging, and we know it. Especially oil corporations are gouging. And we just need to get back to being the party of the working person. I get it. I got to go fundraise. I know, National Democrats have to go fundraise. I'm going to be at a Democratic Governors Association event here in the next few days. And there's lots of talk about fundraising. I get it. But we can either be the party of, corporations and kind of look away as that gouging happens, or enable it with laws and banking regulations, or we can be the party that stands up for working people.
And isn't that the point, though, that Republicans are like turkeys voting for Thanksgiving? When you have a situation where they cannot afford to live, or, the wages don't add up, and yet they are, capitalist in their views. There is something inherently wrong with the argument when the price gouging is such and the profiteering is such that it's not just the bosses that are making so much money, but the fact that healthcare is even profitable at all is crazy. But, these major healthcare companies now, they are making tens of billions of dollars worth of profit. And yet people are still paying in and paying their co-pays and thinking that they're getting it doesn't make any sense to me that there is this disconnect between how much it's costing to live and these companies making so much profit.
There's so many examples of this. We have such a pertinent example in Montana. Again, the legislative session starts with this huge surplus, most of it federal money from COVID, right? But the Republicans, a supermajority has this money. What's the first thing they do? They run out and they give away tax breaks to the wealthy and to big corporations. Well, one of the big corporations they gave it away to was the same corporation that Republicans deregulated our energy market back in the day. And now we have basically one company called Northwestern Energy has, for all intents and purposes, a monopoly. So they give a huge tax break to Northwestern Energy. And then the Republicans control our Public Service Commission, which regulates utility rates. They allow Northwestern Energy to crank energy rates up 28.4%.
Yeah.
Now, you might be able to sell to me, look, we're going to give these guys a tax break because we need lower energy rates. But that ain't what happened. We gave them a tax break, and then they cranked up energy rates, and they pay their executives these big bonuses. And somehow they're celebrated as business geniuses because they were smart enough to lobby for tax breaks, which they got. They were smart enough to lobby the Public Service Commission to increase rates, which they did. And then they were smart enough to impose them on a populace, which they did. And somehow but Republicans celebrate that as success. I'm like, that's a freaking failure of government if I've ever heard of one. And I think we just have to stare that in the face and say it.
It's hard, isn't it, though, when the whole kind of American experiment is based around this dream of you kind of getting successful and making money, and money means that you are successful and you can make it all the way to the top. And it kind of flies in the face of how the economy now presents itself.
Well, I think we're seeing in a place like Montana where it's come, and I know your listeners are probably thinking, no, that isn't that state up there somewhere far west? I don't even know where it is, except for when I watch a Yellowstone or something. But it really is kind of this cutting edge experiment of democracy, and all of this kind of Republican corporate giveaway, and the common person is just getting priced out. Gianforte has this phrase he likes to say, open for business. Well, open for business means 3 more tech bros move here, buy 4 more mansions, employ 2 more people that work in their garage, and screw up our housing market. It's not working. I'm telling you, we are teetering on the edge. I mean, again, working entry-level teachers make $34,000.
Yeah.
$34,000. Where are they going to live? It's coming to a head here, and we're going to have somebody stand up and say it.
Okay. We have to take another quick pause for our sponsor. I'll come back. I want to talk about George Santos and maybe Elon Musk if you've got the stomach for it. Next on The Weekend Show. Everyone knows how annoying cheap razors are. The cuts, the irritation, the frustration. And don't get me started with subscription razor services. The headaches those can cause. That's why you've got to meet Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station and Mars rover. And now they're bringing precision engineering to your shaving experience. Razor blades are like diving boards. The longer the board, the more the wobble. The more wobble, the more nicks, cuts, and scrapes. A bad shave isn't a blade problem, it's an extension problem. By using aerospace-grade CNC machines, Henson makes metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches, which is less than the thickness of a human hair. That means a secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. And it gets better. The razor has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. Seriously, Henson Shaving wants to be the best razor, not the best razor business. That means no plastic, no subscriptions, no proprietary blades, and no planned obsolescence. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades to give you that old-school shave with the benefits of new-school tech. Once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 per year to replace the blades. My first shave with the Henson razor was incredibly refreshing. The design is sleek, the durability is top-notch. The Henson razor is truly so much better than your run-of-the-mill, quote-unquote, traditional razor brand. And the affordability factor is absolutely game-changing. No more wasting your money on expensive blades. With Henson Shaving, you can get a year of blades for $5. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/weekend to pick the razor for you and use code WEEKEND and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure you add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/weekend and use code WEEKEND. Do you remember your first holiday ever? Probably not, but I bet your parents do, and they have pictures to prove it. Probably a lot of pictures to prove it. But even if they have 1 or 2 on the wall, there's a ton they haven't seen in years. You can put all of those amazing childhood Christmas photos in one place where your parents can actually see them with an Aura digital frame. I gave a gift of an Aura digital frame to my mum. All the pictures were already loaded, already stacked. She was able to reminisce about my childhood and seeing my kids growing up as well. Aura was named the #1 digital frame by Wirecutter, The Strategist, and Wired, and it doesn't have to be just your pictures. In the app, you can add other members so that your siblings and cousins and friends can all upload their own photos too. There's unlimited storage, so you don't even have to fight over it. Visit auraframes.com today and get $30 off their best-selling frames with the code WEEKEND. These frames sell out quickly though, so get yours before they're gone. That's auraframes.com with the promo code WEEKEND. Terms and conditions apply. We're back with Ryan Busse on The Weekend Show. George Santos finally got expelled on Friday from Congress. The guy was a con man. Everybody knew he was a con man. There was no question that he was a con man. He admitted he lied on his resume, not to mention stealing campaign funds. And I think the final straw was when a fellow Republican congressman had money stolen from his own credit card and his mother's credit card and sent an email around to all the other Congress people saying, you know, this happened to me, it could happen to you. And it is amazing that, the allegiance that Republican Congress people have towards criminality, and the fact that, the moment that this was discovered many months ago, he really should have been gone the next day. Any civilized government would have done that. And yet they needed his vote. They stuck around. And even the Speaker, Mike Johnson, didn't want him to be voted out in this way. He suggested that he resign. What do you think about this notion that Republicans will take any candidate, no matter what their standards in public life?
Well, of course, the leadership will, because they've made no mistake. They've made no bones about what their aim is, and that is winning is the only thing. It's not about doing something good for your constituency or holding to some set of morals or setting an example. Winning is the only thing. And frankly, I think on the other side in the Senate, I think Bob Menendez needs to go. People say he's not been convicted. He's not this. Well, hold the hearing. Figure out why we have cash stuffed in jacket pockets, which I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of cash stuffed in my jacket pockets. My wife's not driving around a Mercedes that somebody bought for her. Figure that out and get him gone, because not doing it sends the message. We wonder why the electorate does not take our democracy seriously. Well, look at this. We barely kicked out a dude, Santos, like it barely happened. It took months.
Yeah.
What didn't this guy do? He used campaign funds for OnlyFans porn. He used it. He used it for Botox. What didn't this guy do? So if we struggle to boot somebody out like that, then don't come to me when the voters do irrational things. That's what our elected officials are teaching them to do.
I have a working theory that part of the problem is that there is so much corruption behind the scenes amongst Republican politicians, not to mention their own private lives that are, riddled with inappropriate activity, that when something like this does kind of reach the public conscience, they all kind of keep quiet because they're like, oh, rather him than me. There is this very, very much a double standard, preaching about women's rights and about everything else. And behind the scenes, private life is very unequal. We even saw this with the speaker's wife. She was interviewed and had this very kind of meek presentation that gave the impression that, she was very much in the female role in the home, even talking in a baby voice, which has been widely documented in these kind of extremist Christian environments. That's just weird. I don't even know where that's going. That's some fetish. Yeah, I don't know. But this is my point, is that this is the hypocrisy and the double standard. Presenting this image on the outside of, we are cleaner than clean, whiter than white, but actually behind the scenes, it's a mess. And Santos was just one character who happened to talk too much.
Well, think about this. So the same day the Santos news breaks, we have DeSantis's right-hand guy and his wife have now who started Moms for Liberty, which is a rabid anti-gay grassroots organization. Now he is being investigated for sexual battery in a threesome.
Yes.
I mean, so your point is well taken. Like, let's not turn on the lights too bright, because I don't need them seeing everything that's crawling around here. I think that's what's going on.
And we've seen it with these characters who are getting convicted of all sorts of things. I can't remember the name. Is it the Murtaugh family? That's right. Yeah. Who there's a Netflix documentary about them. Again, very upstanding in their district. The family of lawyers, very much have law enforcement, under their belt. And yet it turned out that they were the worst criminals in the village. And
man,
yet,
you pull back the sheets, it's just seedy. Seedy.
And I was watching much of the court case stuff, which was, being televised, and it was shocking to hear what was going on. But what interests me was their public face for so long was that kind of perfect, the white man and his perfect family and that heritage, the father and the law offices and stuff. And I was like, wow, how many other places is this type of activity going on in the US?
Yeah, well, again, I think that has become this veneer of Republican politics where appearances are one thing and actually everything else below it is another thing.
Right.
And the only way you can maintain that is to ever increase the level of vitriol and radicalization, because you need the conversation to be louder and more energized all the time. Otherwise, people get kind of deflated and they stop and look around, like they do turn on the light, right? And they're like, yeah, man, shit's crawling around on the floor. Yeah. And that's why this show has to keep, you notice, just, I don't know if you can stomach it, but just watch Trump's social media. Like it gets worse by the minute, by the minute.
Yes. He was claiming that Judge Engoron's wife had a Twitter account and was posting this extremist material. Turned out it was fake. It was made up by somebody else. She didn't even have a Twitter account. Yeah. It didn't stop the former president from retweeting it. Yeah. And so it seems that anybody and anything now is fair game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty frightening. And that, again, anybody is fair game because you need fuel for the oven, right? You got to keep it rolling, got to keep it getting hotter. That thin slice of people, I really believe, in my campaigning and my run around, I launched September 14th for this campaign. I've met people all across, I've probably done 50 events. They've been amazing. And the average person is just not down with that loud, mean craziness. They just aren't. They want somebody who will give it to them straight. And I hope I'm doing that. But this idea that those kind of people represent the majority of our politics, I just don't believe it.
I think that is something that we should kind of keep, hold dear to ourselves in the coming months, because the noisy ones are often the ones that, in fact, the emergency room is a good example of this. I was once told this by a doctor. In the waiting room for the emergency room, the people that are screaming the loudest in pain, they're not the ones you want to worry about. It's the ones that are sitting quietly in silence that are the ones that need to be triaged immediately.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the same with US politics right now. Trump is making a whole lot of noise, but actually that kind of the quiet confidence of the Democrats, trusting Americans to know that a women's right to choose and everything that goes with that, maintaining democracy as it currently is ultimately going to win out over the extremism.
Well, I hope it's not too quiet, I guess is what I would say. I hope this situation that we've found ourselves in has enlightened Democrats enough to really fight, to care and win, right? I mean, again, I say politics is not about being right. It's not about proving to people how smart you are with your policy points and everything else. It's about winning elections. And if we really care about this stuff, we believe democracy is in peril. We worry about women's rights. We care about voting rights. We care about kids with health care or not, or being fed or not. Then we better campaign and fight like it.
We haven't really talked about guns and the gun debate this conversation, but I thought I'd end, because it is your area of expertise. There have been hundreds and hundreds of mass shootings this year. It's yet again topped the previous year, and the last few years have been unprecedented. And yet I'm not really hearing the kind of gun safety legislation being part of anybody's manifesto going into this next election. Do you think that it's got too quiet, or is it just too much of a divisive issue that politicians are staying away from it?
I think, and I tell a lot of people this when I speak on the subject, I think guns and the gun issue is kind of indicative of how our democracy will go. And the reason I think there isn't much being done on it is because it's a huge, complex, troublesome, fraught, energized, nasty thing. It's in the middle of the partisan battle. I think it is the sort of central beam in the radicalized Republican world. They know that if it's toyed with too much, the whole house is going to fall down. And at the same time, like, there really isn't anything else like this that has the ability to so immediately impact another citizen's right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Like, it's right at the very forefront of our democracy. And I think we're going to figure out how to deal with this and make things marginally better. There is no fix. We've got 425 million guns in the United States. We're not going to be a country that doesn't have guns. I own lots of guns, but we have to balance our responsibility with our freedoms. And we're going to figure out how to do that in guns and make things marginally better instead of making them marginally worse. Or it could be the thing that helps undo the democracy. So I really think the reason it's not really discussed a lot isn't the forefront. It's just so freaking hard to deal with. There are other things that are a lot more simple, and they're a lot easier to talk about, and so they get more airtime. But I think this one's pretty important.
Do you think the US can ever really be described as a civilized society whilst there are 420 million guns in circulation, where abortion has been banned effectively in many states, where healthcare is unaffordable? Is it getting to a point where healthcare is for profit and therefore unaffordable? Are we getting to a point where you can't hold the US up as one of the kind of great free countries and celebrate its democracy and its civility by nature of the fact that these things are just baked in, not to mention racism and everything else, the anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment that is very much bubbling, under the surface?
It is. Well, there's a lot in that question. Do I think that the United States can, well, first off, a United States and a democracy like ours, with the rights that we have decided to grant ourselves through our Constitution to all citizens, it will never be a perfect country. It will never. And so when I speak, there's a lot of angst typically in an audience, and a hand will go up and say, like, Ryan, how do we fix this?
Yeah.
Well, there is no fixing a country like ours. What there is are decent, reasonable people that work to make it better instead of work to make it worse. And on guns, do I think we can do that? Absolutely, I think we can do it. But we can't do it if responsible gun owners turn their backs and pretend that it can just keep going like it is, and we don't seem to care about kids in Uvalde being killed, or grocery shoppers in Buffalo being killed because they're black, right? I mean, lots of things that work there: race, guns, class, all sorts of things going on there. We can be better than we are. We shouldn't hold ourselves up to be perfect, but we can damn sure be better than we are. And the truth is, the 425 million guns, most gun owners are responsible. If they weren't, we would have, there would be no country on earth. We would already be in the most unbelievable bloody civil war you've ever seen, because there's plenty of guns out there for that to be happening, yet it doesn't. What responsible gun owners need to stand up and say, okay, and let's make sure that the dangerous stuff around the fringe doesn't make things worse. I think that can happen, but it's going to take people calling on it to happen.
And the messaging is so important, isn't it? How do you think Democrats should respond when Republicans say they're trying to take your guns away?
I mean, I think they should respond like I do, which is, I own lots of guns. I want to continue to own guns. I believe I have the right to defend myself, and I care about my fellow citizens. And so I think we have to balance responsibility. It's not about taking people's rights away or their property away. It's about balancing responsibility with freedoms. And there's no right in this country that's going to work if it's not balanced with responsibility. Speech doesn't work that way, and our gun rights won't work that way. And so I think Democrats need to focus on that balance of and responsibility. Right, is a conservative word. This is something that the conservative side of the aisle has always wanted to own, these terms like decency and responsibility and these things. I think we should speak in those terms, and we should lean that way. I'm not about taking anybody's guns. I tell people I'm not anti-gun. I'm anti-asshole. And who isn't, right? Who isn't? So let's figure out where we agree.
I suppose a lot of gun control activists have been pushing people to talk about gun safety rather than gun control. Control is, it's a word that is divisive, and yet gun safety is more common sense. Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, I think that rhetoric is much more useful. And the way I speak to people is, in terms and in stories that they identify with. Republican moms don't want to drop their kids off at school and worry about whether their kids are going to come home. Republican moms and dads don't want to worry about that any more than Democratic moms and dads do. And so let's go to where we agree. Responsibility, red flag laws, like this main thing. There were so many things, quote unquote, red flags that were missed. So we have systems that would have stopped that guy. We dallied around in some of them. The cops knocked on his door a few times. They didn't make contact with him. They did. So we kind of know what to do, yet we don't fully institute it and we don't fully fund it. So if we had a stronger red flag system there would be 18 people still alive, probably, including maybe the shooter, and lots of people who were injured, because we knew what to do. It wasn't taking anybody's guns away, and yet we didn't fully institute it and fund it. And I think there's a lot of stuff we can do like that nobody really disagrees with.
I drove past my local gun shop the other day. It's a huge independently owned gun store in California. And every time I drive by, I mean, I haven't got the confidence to get out of the car and go near it, but I just wondered, what is the thinking, if it's possible to describe, of people who own these types of stores, who are obviously very much into their firearms, to actually, especially in California, to want to work with the government to enact either red flag laws or gun safety legislation, because a lot of it stops in the store, doesn't it? And with store owners.
So there's a wide variance of firearms retailers across the country. Some of them are very troubled and are always conscious. And I think most of them do they really do try to do their level best to obey the law as it's written. Some of them, though, are starting to buy into this sort of Civil War mentality, like you must do this because you must be ready to kill your fellow citizen. That, I think, is very, very dangerous, very frightening and dangerous. But let's just say it's you, right? And your neighbor is threatening you and your family every night. And you go to that gun store and you ask the gun store owner, I don't know what to do. These people are going to kill my daughter. And in that instance, right, that gun store owner is helping you out. And I'm thankful. You might save your daughter's life or your life. And a lot of gun store owners see themselves like that. And a lot of the gun sales go down like that. Not all. Some of them are bad and irresponsible, but a lot of them are like that. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. That can be an empowering thing, as long as it's balanced with responsibility.
We have to finish in a minute, but I just want to finally talk about Elon Musk, because he launched the Cybertruck 3 years too late, a couple of days ago. Famously, it's now bulletproof, and they showed someone shooting at it and putting just little dents in the door, and he was saying, because he did the launch, the presentation, and he was like, in the movies when you see people shoot at doors and people hiding behind car doors, it doesn't work. The bullet goes right through. Well, with this. And then he started to basically present this Cybertruck as a vehicle for the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Like he has a sense that there is going to be a kind of end of days for America and potentially the world. And, whilst he was saying it half jokingly, I mean, this guy is not the full ticket anymore, sadly.
I mean, come on. Elon Musk is like...
He believed it.
I don't know. I never really bought into the Musk, the sort of ethos about his genius. Yeah. I'm sure that he's plenty intelligent in certain areas, but come on, the guy's off his rails. And I'm not sure if he thinks we're going to Mars, we're blowing up his rocket, we're driving a Cybertruck through some kind of RoboCop movie in his mind. I don't know what's going on, but man, he's he's taken the red pill here. And in the same week, he tells Bob Iger to go fuck himself on, in the New York press appearance. And I don't know. I have a Chevy truck, which I drive, and it will be a long time. Well, let me say this emphatically. You will never see me in a Cybertruck, ever. It won't happen. And I don't think you're ever going to see one in Montana. If you do, they're not going to be shot at, but they will be laughed at.
But what's problematic with him is that he is the richest man in the world. He wields enormous power, right? So after the drama with him posting anti-Semitic comments on Twitter,
Netanyahu welcomes him.
The next day, he's walking with Netanyahu wearing a bulletproof vest that just about covered his rib cage.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the dystopian future that they wrote about that we are now living in, Ryan.
It's pretty close to idiocracy. It really is pretty close to idiocracy. I mean, would you really, if you owned a gas station or a deli or some small little mom and pop shop, would you really trust Elon Musk to run it? I wouldn't. I mean, maybe he can run Tesla. Okay. I wouldn't trust him to run basic stuff with personal interactions at a business I own.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it changes our view, as we were saying earlier, about, the American dream, the fact that he came here as an immigrant and he's made a huge success of his business. And you can't doubt that his impact on society in terms of satellites for communication, aside from the electric vehicle revolution, Solar City, and, SpaceX, it's massive. But, he's taking huge amounts of money for government contracts now for the satellites and for the space race.
Yeah.
But it's so dangerous, isn't it? Because that American dream that he has achieved is now being twisted, where he is become an evil genius.
Yeah, he right? is a bit of, I mean, he whines about Disney, but he's going to be a movie character here pretty quick. It seems as though that's what.
Well, he's Iron Man, isn't he? He's already Iron Man.
He is kind of. Genius is a powerful thing, but I think for the most part, really good focused geniuses need to stay in their lane. Yeah. And he just got way out of his lane. And I think the Isaacson book is pretty clear about that. There are certain things about the way he thinks, about the way he's driven, that's been quite useful in him doing the constructive things, like Starlink, you mentioned, amazing. But he shouldn't be allowed to be within a couple thousand miles of a social media company. It's pretty obvious.
And of course, Neuralink is the next thing, where you're implanting the microchip into the brain. I mean, it's almost as if you need to have that kind of autistic mind to prevent you from thinking this can't be done.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to give people like Elon credit for head down being so determined. They just fight through it and do it. But it's just gone way too far, and it's so destructive now. I mean, the way he is influencing anti-Semitism and just general hate and trolling, and I mean, let's face it, Twitter, X, or whatever he's going to call it next week, it's turned into a pretty dark place now.
And sadly, it also means the loss of the town square. There are so few places to have conversations, political or otherwise, and you don't spend $44 billion to buy something like that isn't even worth a quarter of that, unless you have an agenda, political agenda, to silence true democratic political discourse.
And I think you hit on it. I recognized early on when he started this Twitter thing, I'm like, look, he hates real democracy and exchange of ideas, and he's going to tear it apart, and he is tearing it apart.
I didn't want to end on a sour note like that, but I feel like we have to for time. But I recognize that, it is uniquely America that gives people these opportunities. Yeah. And, Putin just banned LGBTQ plus protest in Russia just a couple of days ago in a closed door meeting. And that is my fear for the US, is that characters like Musk and the rise of Trump and the rise of authoritarianism will take away those types of rights. So
I think you're right. And I'm not going to let you get away here. I'm going to rattle off my campaign website, but there's hope.
Do it.
Because we're going to change the way democratic politics is happening. We're going to beat a Republican incumbent governor. And when we do, we're going to shake the country. Over 1.5 million people have already viewed our launch video, which is amazing. Like, top tier Senate races get a couple 100,000 views. Our launch video went nuts, and it's just like a Tuesday with our family. But you can see it all at Busse, Busse for Montana, just all spelled out, busseformontana.com. Would love you to join up. It's pretty exciting. And I really really appreciate you having me on, and I really appreciate you caring about the country and the democracy. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, Ryan Busse. I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minute news and download the daily 5-Minute News podcast. You can hear me tell you what's happening in the US and around the world while you make a morning coffee. Join us next week with a brand new special guest, 3 more factual news stories to discuss on the 5-Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.